Okay, so do you remember last week? This might be the most poorly timed thing I've ever talked about on the podcast. Remember last week I talked about 14, how some classes were so much worse than others that it was numerically impossible to clear the new content?
I do remember.
Within like 2 hours of the end of that podcast, they're like, we are taking the game down for maintenance and we are going to nerf that encounter by like 1% of its overall health because we are aware that some group compositions cannot clear it. But the fun part was the statement they put out was very politely worded and very careful, but essentially was, well, we have our balance team do it, and then we base the boss fight and the numbers around the balance team, and it looks like we overestimated the player population's ability to do damage or something like that. And the general consensus was the devs are going like, sorry, y'all are trash.
Skill issue.
Like,
Skill
sorry, y'all are
issue.
garbage. And then that was ongoing for like 5 days, and then they put out a way bigger statement that went into way more detail about the way they design the fights and how they get the numbers. And in that is the phrase, we have typically balanced the game under the understanding that the top players in the game are much better than the balance team. However, the balance team has gotten too good and did not take into account blah, blah, blah. So even though they do this massive, like, oh, we didn't mean to call you guys trash. Here's how. If you look deep enough, you can still find them calling you trash. Still. And it's fucking hilarious. And they buffed a couple classes that were really feeling it, but I had a issue with this where on Sunday I was playing with my friends and we are doing some content, and I have a buddy of mine who plays Reaper, which is currently the worst damaging melee DPS. He used to play Ninja, which is currently the top performing melee DPS, right? So on a whim, he's like, well, why don't I switch out from Reaper to Ninja? Reaper had been feeding it gear for 4 weeks. It was as high powered as it could possibly be. Ninja was using like old shit from like 6 weeks ago. And despite the fact that he didn't know his rotation correctly and was like, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm just doing old Ninja shit, he out damaged his prior run by like 10%. It is the why, like, it is the difference between I am bleeding edge this shit with the best possible run versus yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. Fucking okay. Like, stupid. Like, they brought the boss health down, which is nice, but they didn't fix the core problem, which is like this class up here and this class way down here. Way down. It's fucking stupid.
It's funny because switch from Reaper to Ninja absolutely sounds like an Overwatch sentence there.
Absolutely does.
No, but that reminds me of the old. I don't know if you remember the old lies about the Capcom dev team, and to some greater extent, many fighting game devs as well beyond Capcom kind of have this. There's an invisible lie that was very important, and it was the idea that any of the playtesters and the devs that worked on the game that help the team balance they could win Evo if they ever entered.
They're super freaks.
They would absolutely.
They're
right?
Unknown killers.
The absolute best players in the world are not the people you see winning the tournaments. It's the ones who work for the company. And that kind of little invisible idea allowed everyone to go, oh, therefore the balancing is going to be fair because the best
Yeah.
people in the world know what it actually should be.
Yeah, if it looks like it's horribly balanced, that's because you just haven't adapted yet.
Exactly. And I remember it got to a point even where like that started cracking over time when, players started some of the people that started working for the companies were people that used to be players, certainly. You're like, okay, well, I literally know, I saw your tournament placing. I know how good you are at this game. And, you're not a guaranteed winner at Evo every single year. And then, like, there was also times when devs would come to Evo and they'd hang out and, like, they'd do just fun matches on Salty Sweet streams. And, like, if a dev is hanging out and like losing to a top player on a stream, then it's like, uh-oh, now top players are the ones that should be able to tell the devs what they need to do to balance the game, because clearly they're more skilled. And this just becomes...
No, don't worry. The balanced people are I still remember in 2012 getting to meet and hang out with Dave Lang for a little bit and just trashed him at Dive Kick. Just dumpstered him. First time I ever played Dive Kick and like just beating fucking poor Dave Lang into the dirt. And yes, this is before he died. Yeah. And I remember like consistently going like, okay, man, you can start. Come on, you can stop taking it easy. Come on, let's have a match. And he's like, I am having a real match.
Yes.
This is real. I'm not messing with you. And I'm like, okay, let's leave the balancing to Keats.
Yeah, well,
the rest of them.
Sometimes you sign the checks, but you don't exactly. That's what you're good at. So
that came off angrier than it was. He was actually. It was more like, no, I am. Come on, no, that's a real. Come on.
Mm-hmm. Skill issue, say the devs.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Skill issue, say the devs, is always really, really, really fucking funny when you find out that no, it's dev issue. It's the fact that for 14 anyway, I'm pretty sure different classes are balanced by different people. I think that is the case. And that because sometimes you get a good rework and sometimes you get a bad rework, and it's like, how is the same people reaching good decisions with this one, but bad decisions with this one?
I mean, it's different balancing a game where it's not about, like, the impression I get, at least with 14, where it's not about outplaying, it's about perfecting a sequence and not fucking up. So it's like more of like a rhythm chart, right?
Yeah,
like,
now there's how many obvious changes.
So it's like, if you're playing Guitar Hero or Rock Band on Expert, should fucking up one note kill you? Maybe not. How many notes should kill you? How many in a row versus how many spread out, right? That's a different type of balancing.
That's a really interesting point that you bring up, because there's two types of balancing that has become a large disagreement with the dev team, like from the overall community. The first of which is that in the past they have said, well, if the job's harder to play, it should probably do more damage, right? So 4 buttons per second should probably end up with a minor damage increase, because getting that uptime perfectly should be more difficult, right? The current reality is the easiest jobs right now are actually the strongest by like a huge margin. And the other is, do you remember? God, what was it called? The lady tax in fucking Capcom games for health, where if you were a girl, you could not have 1,000 health.
Yeah, 900
in a ton of Capcom games. So 14 has a version of that where they say ranged classes that can fight from range should do less damage than classes that can't fight from range, because their uptime is going to be 100%, right? Whereas if you have to move out of the way of bullshit, well, your uptime's not going to actually be 100% if you're like a melee class.
What does uptime mean?
Uptime means literal how many seconds of the fight are you hitting the boss.
Okay.
If you have to move really far away from the boss for a mechanic, you can't hit the boss. But if you're melee, right? Because of some changes to encounter design, now the bosses all have massive hitboxes and everybody has 100% uptime. But the ranged text is still in place.
Right. Okay. Because that boss. Yeah. Okay. That boss
Right?
deletes that thing. Yeah. I see.
Yeah, it's like, well, the melee guys have 95, 100% uptime. Do they really need to also do 5% more damage? Like, it's funny.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
and this is also a game where you can just where you're creating a new boss and a new challenge and a new set of rules every time that has to work with everything you've established so far. You
yeah,
know.
it's there's all sorts of fancy little problems with the way like this balancing works.
Mm-hmm.
So the
It
most interesting thing by far is Dancer and how hard it is to how to do Dancer. Um, sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I was just gonna say that in competitive games, um, you can balancing in competitive games is like introducing a new type of chess piece to the board and reflecting how it works in play. Whereas what you're describing for like an MMO is actually
Yeah,
introducing a new board with the same chess
yeah.
pieces on it. And that's a completely different fucking way of balancing things.
There's also a social aspect, and that's where Dancer comes in because it's actually very strange. Dancer's a class that it doesn't do as much damage as Bard or Machinist, which are its role brothers and sisters. But what it does do is give you a damage bonus to somebody else in the team. So you go, hey, I would like to pick, let's say, a samurai as my dance partner. Samurai gets a 10% buff to crit or damage. I forget what it is exactly, right? But your overall damage is not just your damage, it's also split by buffing somebody else, right? What happens is that under all equal optimal solutions, it would actually do the same amount of damage as say Machinist. The issue is that when you're actually doing progressive rating or you're doing that, you're feeding the highest damage character all the best gear, which is then being multiplied by the dancer's buff. So now Dancer is doing a disproportionately higher amount of damage because they're buffing the one person that's getting much stronger faster than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a really fringe case and only applies to highly specific situations, but it's the situation that it matters the most. So how the fuck do you balance around that?
Mm-hmm.
Do you make dancers weaker in most content so that they're equal or maybe a little bit better in the highest content? Or
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm. And what also sucks, or not sucks, but I imagine what also gets factored in is like the legacy of a character and what it's been over the course of the game and what that means to people, and not like
oh
straying
yeah,
too far from that as well.
there's a huge amount of
If
in
I'm
MMOs
dispassionate
like
and I don't care about what Dancer ever was or used to be, I can just be like, oh yeah, here's your solution. And then people are like, but that's not what it's about or it ever has been about.
yeah, no, there's people like Paladin is a fucking mess right now. Like Paladin sucks. And people go just switch to Dark Knight, and to many people who play Paladin, they go, but I don't want to fucking play Dark Knight. I want to fucking play Paladin. And it sucks because Paladin is worse now because they buffed other classes and not even its competitors. The way the damage works in that game is that like, oh, Dragoon or fucking Ninja, they put out a damage buff for everybody. They decrease the boss's defense, or they fucking increase the party's damage, or they increase the party's crit rate, whatever, right? Over the past year, they've made it so that all of those buffs are on a 2-minute timer. So every 2 minutes, everybody pops their buffs and they all multiply on top of one another, right? Which means you want to get all your highest damage shit within a 1 20-second window every 2 minutes. The Paladin has its rotations spread out over 2 minutes and 5 seconds. It doesn't have the ability to dump all of its damage in 1 20-second window. It actually spreads it all out. So because everybody else got streamlined, all of a sudden Paladin is way worse. And because Dark Knight can dump every button it has in a 15-second window just by mashing them all out, now it's way better.
Mm.
It's weird. It's silly. They're gonna have to rework the whole class, and that means that people who like the way the thing plays now might not like the way it plays in 2 months.
Mm-hmm. Um. Yeah, that's. I get this. This whole thing is a whatever the length of time it's been, 10-year puzzle.
Yeah.
And it also, I'm just thinking of the all the when the 2 seconds I was looking at Warframe 4, and it was just like this frame reworked, this frame reworked,
Oh yeah.
and how it was like, this is not even like, you're not doing raids with 40 people. It's not
No, you're
even,
not doing any hard content in Warframe at all.
but even that required extensive reworking of certain things for just a simple PvE experience. And it's like, my God, man. Like,
Yeah.
even in that circumstance where you'd think it would just be like, yeah, it's PvE, who cares? And it'd be like, no, you got, even there, it's an issue. So,
Somebody did make a really good point in the chat, which is like, and this is all irrelevant for about 99% of the game's content, which is absolutely true. But it does create a situation in which if you get all the way to cap right now with, say, Paladin, and you're like, I want to get into high-end content, you're starting at like a disadvantage compared to somebody who just picked a class that happened to be much better. And it sucks because the game historically has been pretty well balanced, but right now it's in a rough state.
um,
I got lucky because I'm playing like the strongest tank class, which is perfect. So hooray!